For years, Meghan Markle sold us a perfect story. You know the one, this polished fairy tale of a biracial girl raised by a strong, single black mother, the ever-supportive Doria Ragland, a woman who supposedly stood by her side through every storm, through the chaos of royal life, through the whispers and headlines. But what if I told you that story was never complete? What if I told you there might be a missing piece, a secret so big that if it's true, it could rewrite Meghan's entire family history? Yes, the whispers are back. The ones tied to old California records, to those odd gaps in Doria's past that no one ever seems to explain. Because according to some very quiet, very persistent rumors, Doria may have had another child, a daughter, long before Meghan was born. A daughter hidden from the world, kept in silence. And when Meghan supposedly heard about these whispers, sources claim she was left speechless, completely shaken. They say she was caught between disbelief and the same chilling silence her mother once gave her. Because if this is true, if there is another daughter, then the story we've all been fed about Meghan's childhood isn't just incomplete, it's a cover-up. But why hide it? Why would Doria conceal a child from the world, even from Meghan? To understand that, you have to rewind. Go back to the years when Doria all but disappeared from public view. The years when court files were quietly sealed in Riverside, California. The years that, until now, nobody seemed to want to talk about. For years, one question has haunted people who've looked into Meghan's background. Where exactly was Doria Ragland during those crucial years of her daughter's life? It's like someone ripped whole chapters out of a diary. Doria pops up, then vanishes, then reappears again as if nothing happened. Sources claim at least 2 court cases were filed under her name back then. And during those years, Doria wasn't in the spotlight. She wasn't beside Meghan. She wasn't even in the story. She was gone. Some say she was simply keeping a low profile. But others whisper something darker, because for a woman who now sits beside royalty, those missing years are dripping with too much silence. Silence that feels intentional. Silence that feels protective. Protective of what, though? Or should I say, protective of who? When Meghan speaks about her childhood, her version of events always sounds polished. Too polished, the kind of narrative you'd expect from a public figure who knows how to shape perception. She paints herself as the daughter of a strong single mom in Los Angeles, raised with kindness, taught strength, molded in grace. A picture-perfect story of resilience. But here's where it gets messy. The details keep changing. In some interviews, Meghan says her father, Thomas Markle, was always there, always supportive. In others, he fades into the background, erased by this tale of single mother independence. And don't even get me started on her education claims, international relations major. University records suggest that degree didn't even exist in the form she described. The point is, the story doesn't add up neatly. But it is the story Meghan built her entire public identity on. Who she is, where she comes from, it's her foundation. And now that foundation is shaking. Because maybe the truth doesn't start with Meghan at all. Maybe it starts with Doria, with the secrets she kept. And then, out of nowhere, came the moment that changed everything. 2021, Meghan's Archetypes podcast. She told the world she had taken a DNA test. Her result? 43% Nigerian. The revelation exploded across headlines. Meghan embraced it like a missing puzzle piece. She even called her mother to share the news. And what did Doria do? She didn't gush with pride. She didn't even respond quickly. She paused. A long, quiet pause, then finally, a soft reply. That pause became one of the most repeated details of Meghan's story. Some people said it sounded like emotion. Others said it sounded like recognition. At the time, no one questioned it, but here's where the story cracks wide open. Because years before Meghan ever made her big DNA announcement, another woman had told the exact same story. Word for word, beat for beat. Yes, you heard that right. Another woman miles away had discovered she too was 43% Nigerian. She too called her mother. She too was met with the same haunting silence, the same percentage, the same reaction, the same pause. Too specific, too identical, almost impossible to dismiss as coincidence. And that's when curiosity morphed into suspicion. Because if Meghan's story wasn't entirely hers, then whose story was she telling? 4 years before Meghan ever sat on that podcast microphone, a young British writer named Georgina was staring at her own DNA test results on a quiet Caribbean island. The year was 2017. She was in her 20s, restless, and had always felt different from the family she grew up with in South London. Darker skin, different hair, endless questions about identity, questions no one seemed willing to answer. And then the test came back, 43% Nigerian. Her whole world shifted in that moment. She grabbed her phone, FaceTimed her mother, and told her the news. And what happened? Silence, a pause, a chilling, heavy stillness before her mother finally spoke, softly, carefully, like she had been carrying a truth too big to say aloud. That moment haunted Georgina so much that she turned it into a book, a memoir called Raceless, published in 2020 and covered by The Guardian, among others. Her story was raw, heartbreaking, and real. It wasn't some fairy tale with royal titles. It was about identity ripped apart and rebuilt. And yet, 1 year later, almost line for line, the Duchess of Sussex was telling the exact same story as if it were her own. Coincidence? Or something more? Every single trail in this tangled web leads right back to Doria Ragland. When Meghan said her mother paused for that long, heavy silence, the world thought it was emotion. But with Georgina's story out in the open, that pause feels heavier, more loaded, less like surprise and more like recognition. Because there are still those missing years in Doria's life. Years tied to sealed court filings in Riverside, California. Years when she wasn't in Meghan's picture at all. Years when, according to whispers, something happened that she never wanted exposed. When she finally reappeared, she never explained those gaps. She moved forward, but never backward. And that long pause on the FaceTime call, suddenly it feels like a bridge between the past she lived and the truth she could never say. But here's the wildest twist. Georgina, the woman whose story echoes Meghan's down to the finest detail, has actually defended Meghan publicly. She's written about the racism Meghan faced, praising her courage for speaking up about identity, almost as if she didn't realize the Duchess was parroting her own lived experience. Or maybe, just maybe, she does know. Maybe she chooses silence to protect her peace, because when you listen to both women, the similarities are eerie. Both talk about belonging in the same rhythm, growing up feeling like outsiders, searching for identity, discovering roots, wanting the world to understand. The pattern is too tight, too precise. It's not just resemblance, it's reflection. And then Meghan took her newfound heritage global. She boarded a plane to Nigeria for what was marketed as a homecoming visit. This was supposed to be her shining moment, her chance to embrace her roots, honor her ancestry, and cement her bond with Nigeria. But instead of pride, it spiraled into embarrassment. The First Lady of Nigeria spoke openly about modesty, respect, and cultural sensitivity, remarks that many believed were thinly veiled criticism aimed directly at Meghan. Her fashion, her demeanor, her entire presentation, it didn't sit well. And then came the breaking point. Officials reportedly asked Meghan to show proof of the DNA test. The very test she had spoken about so proudly, the one she used to frame her entire Nigerian connection. Her answer? She didn't have it with her. Let that sink in. DNA results today are digital, accessible in seconds. A screenshot, an email, an account login, it's not some fragile paper certificate you can misplace. Yet Meghan, standing in Nigeria, telling the world this was her heritage, claimed she couldn't produce proof. Authorities even offered to help trace her ancestry through their own genealogy records. And again, she declined. For many, this was the red flag moment. The story suddenly hit a wall. It could only survive as long as no one asked for evidence. From that point, the tone shifted. The proud Nigerian Duchess narrative flipped into doubt, even ridicule. What was meant to be a triumphant trip exposing her truth ended with headlines questioning her honesty. And all those questions kept circling back, not just to Meghan, but to Doria, to those missing years, to the possibility of another daughter, one hidden from the spotlight. Because let's face it, two women, both claiming 43% Nigerian, both FaceTiming their mothers, both met with silence, both telling the world about discovery. It stretches the definition of coincidence until it snaps. So here we are, staring down two possibilities, both explosive. Possibility 1. Doria's missing years weren't just quiet years, they were years of separation. Years when another child may have been born. A daughter raised far from Los Angeles, shielded from the Markle narrative, never told who she truly was. Possibility 2. Meghan, desperate to root her story in something deeper, borrowed pieces of Georgina's identity to fill the gaps left by her mother's silence. Both are scandalous. Both shake the carefully curated royal narrative. And both refuse to go away. Because the truth is, history has a way of leaking out. Secrets don't stay buried forever. They wait for a crack. For one small question to blow the lid off. And maybe that's why Doria paused on that call. Maybe that pause wasn't hesitation. Maybe it was her last act of protection. For Meghan, for the story, and maybe for another daughter we've never seen. In royal tales, the crowns sparkle, the titles dazzle, the cameras blind. But the real truth, it hides in the shadows. And in this story, those shadows whisper louder than the crown itself.